The story began where a shout heard from a small house where Annette had been hiding for years. As she sat quietly by the window, she stared at the newspaper in disbelief. The headline reported that the Crown Prince of Dorado, Sisrain von Axelperian, had emerged victorious after completely crushing the Frese Empire. Yet what shocked her even more was the reason behind the war. The article stated that the Crown Prince was searching for a woman named Annette. She could hardly believe it. Why would the future ruler of an empire start a war just to find someone like her? Before she could recover from her shock, another headline caught her attention. It announced that Grand Duke Heinrich Hyacinth, the next master of the Magic Tower and the youngest archmage in history, had placed a bounty on his long-lost older sister. The reward was an astonishing 5.8 trillion gold. Annette nearly dropped the newspaper. That amount was equivalent to a nation's entire budget. Then again, if it was Heinrich, she knew he was more than capable of doing something so outrageous. Unfortunately, the surprises didn't end there. Another article revealed that Larva, the infamous information broker known as the Messenger of Death, had declared war on the Kingdom of Delphi simply because they had dared to touch a certain bakery. The article further stated that he intended to exterminate their entire bloodline. As the actual owner of that bakery, Annette could only hold her head in disbelief. Kyle had truly lost his mind. No, all three of them had. Suddenly, a chilling gust of wind swept through the room, causing the newspapers to flutter violently across the floor. The lights went out. Sensing something was wrong, Annette slowly rose from her chair. Then she felt a presence behind her. Her body instantly froze. The moment she turned around, she came face to face with one of the very men she had spent years running away from. Sisrain von Axelperian, the Crown Prince of Dorado, the same man she had just read about in the newspaper. Fear rooted her to the spot as he slowly approached her. When he finally stood before her, he leaned close and softly whispered that he had missed her. At that moment, Annette finally understood the source of the ominous feeling she'd been experiencing all day. It was him, the man standing right in front of her. She was still too stunned to speak when she suddenly felt something wrapping around her wrist. Looking down, she discovered a crimson tie coiling around her arm like a leash. Sisrain calmly informed her that if she wanted to run away again, she would first have to cut off his hand. Internally, Annette desperately screamed for help, but before she could react, another voice echoed through the room. "Sister." She turned her head and saw another familiar figure. It was Heinrich Hyacinth, the Grand Duke and youngest archmage in history. Without hesitation, Heinrich pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. He asked why she hadn't kept her promise. After all, she had promised never to leave him. His embrace tightened. Then he softly whispered into her ear that lying was a bad thing. To make matters worse, he gently bit her pinky finger before asking what kind of punishment should be given to a child whose mind was already struggling to process everything when a third voice suddenly called out, "Master." A young man had appeared before her without her even noticing. Kneeling at her feet, he begged her to stay by his side. Annette stared at him in shock. When had he even arrived? The man clung desperately to her skirt like an abandoned puppy, yet she knew exactly who he was. Kyle Winston, the bloodthirsty leader of the continent's largest information network. One after another, the three men made their intentions clear. Sisrain declared that she would never escape him, not in life and not even in death. Heinrich reminded her that she already knew how deeply he loved her and promised that his love would last forever. Meanwhile, Kyle simply begged her to spend the rest of her life with him. Surrounded by their overwhelming affection and terrifying obsession, Annette could only stand there in complete confusion. How had these three powerful men become so obsessed with her? Perhaps the answer lay in the past. Perhaps it all started on the day she first met Sisrain, the Crown Prince. Back then, Annette was only 12 years old. She had brought a loaf of bread for a strange boy who lived alone inside a cave. Carefully placing the bread on a nearby table, Annette hid underneath it. She was certain that if he smelled the fresh bread, his hunger would eventually lure him out. Excitedly, she waited. Then she saw it, a small hand cautiously reaching toward the bread. Her heart immediately softened. Sisrain had finally appeared. Remembering the rumors that his senses were as sharp as a predator's, Annette decided to approach him. Annette crawled beneath the massive kitchen table, her sudden appearance startling Sisrain, who was sitting quietly on the floor. Smiling brightly, she greeted him with a cheerful, "Hi there." The vibrant Annette pulled her knees tight against her chest, beaming with pure joy as she introduced herself. "My name is Annette," she exclaimed. Sisrain, a dark-haired boy with striking red eyes, merely stared back at her. His expression was a mix of startle and hesitation, and he offered no words in return. Yet, undeterred by his cold silence, Annette leaned closer. A sparkling, enthusiastic smile lit up her face, thrilled that he hadn't immediately tried to escape her company this time. "You're not running away today?" she asked playfully. Sisrain's gaze drifted away. When he looked back at her, his intense red eyes were entirely serious. "To me?" he corrected quietly before bluntly stating, "You shouldn't talk to me." Annette's cheerful demeanor instantly faltered. Her green eyes widened in confusion. She tilted her head, wondering aloud, "Huh? Why?" Clutching his piece of bread even tighter, Sisrain sat isolated. He explained his tragic self-perception with a devastating cold certainty. "Because I'm a dirty kid. If you talk to me, you'll get dirty too." Staring at him in the shadowed silence, her heart ached with a heavy, profound sympathy. She looked at the boy before her, deeply shaken, determined to shatter his dark thoughts. Annette reached out. Sisrain barely had time to process her movement before her small hands cupped his cheeks, instantly catching him off guard. Utterly bewildered by the sudden physical contact. "No," Annette declared, her voice firm and ringing with absolute clarity. "You aren't dirty." Holding his face gently between her palms, she looked deeply into his startled red eyes. "In the future, you will become a greater and more important person than anyone else," she promised with unwavering conviction, flashing him a brilliant, dazzling smile. "That's what I believe, you know?" Sisrain froze, a soft flush creeping onto his cheeks as her bright, warm words washed over him. The sudden burst of intense positivity was so overwhelming that he immediately turning his back to her in a flustered panic, her mouth wide open in comical shock at his abrupt rejection. Yet, despite his embarrassed reaction, her words carried an absolute truth. In fact, Sisrain really would become an incredibly high and noble person. Annette knew this for certain because that was the exact plot of the novel she had transmigrated into. The dark-rated 19 BL novel titled Dogs of the Mansion. The novel features as non-consensual relationship, confinement, kidnapping, and more, making the novel a highly stimulating, spicy BL. The beginning of the novel is an orphanage called The Forest, which is a secret training facility that awakens the abilities of orphans and send them off to be adopted by aristocrats. The novel sought to make these awakened children the trophies of their families, and the children were treated as high-priced merchandise. Annette's favorite character in the novel is the main character named Heinle. Born from the body of a lowly courtesan, a boy who inherited his high-ranking noble father's genius magic. This boy, possessing both flawless beauty and exceptional talent, suffered from being abandoned by his parents, and his personality was incredibly foul-tempered. Thus, he tormented Sisrain again and again. The problem was that Sisrain belonged to the Mephisto bloodline, a family known for possessing destructive abilities. Not only that, but he was actually an abandoned member of the royal family. The lineage of Mephisto possesses a special ability. While it is a rare blessing granted to only a few chosen descendants, it simultaneously acts as an agonizing curse. Until these descendants reach an age where they can consciously control their hyper-developed five senses, they are forced to live through every single day in pure, unadulterated physical agony. Reason why Sisrain forced to live hidden away in the isolation of a dark cave. While he's inside his cave, he gets caught in a brutal trap that severely injures his leg, leaving him with a permanent, lifelong limp. Heinle ruthlessly mocks his injury, sneering and calling him a cripple. Sisrain is nothing more than someone to look down upon. Sisrain's glowing red eyes burn with deep-seated resentment, ensuring that Heinle would ultimately be branded as someone who deserved a harsh fate. After ascending to the position of crown prince, Sisrain immediately unleashes his long-awaited vengeance. He begins his retaliation as if he had been biding his time for this precise moment. This entire brutal history belonged to a dark, angsty novel where love had long withered away, leaving behind nothing but a tragic state of ecstatic depravity. It was a story so bleak that it caused its reader to cry continuously. Annette panics in sheer shock and terror. Realizing her reality has dissolved, she internally screams the horrifying truth. She has suddenly transmigrated directly into that very same dark novel. Breaking her out of her spiral of deep dread, a voice calls out to her in a grand room, snapping her back to reality. "Annette, what are you thinking about so deeply?" She snaps out of her thoughts with a startle after having her dinner with her friends. Annette carefully holding a freshly baked, warm, golden loaf of bread wrapped neatly in a floral-patterned cloth. She decided to bring the bread to Sis Rain. Annette stands resolutely, clutching her bag tight. A sharp, fiercely determined look flashes in her green eyes as she mentally maps out her strategy. Moving forward, her plan consists of only two things. First, she must ensure that Sis Rain can live comfortably in the forest, safe and protected just like the other children. Her boots tread carefully, silenced by the shadows as she approaches a massive set of double doors. Standing before them, her second and most vital objective, to make sure Heinley and Sis Rain get along. Pausing just outside the door, Annette looks down thoughtfully. To fix the future and avoid a dark, tragic fate, she must interfere immediately. Heinley and Sis Rain's very first meeting has to be completely different from the original story. In the original novel, things took a dark turn right around here. Our protagonist, Annette, remembers the tragic plot of the story. The character Heinley felt nothing but disgust for Sis Rain, whose leg was left to rot away after a terrible, untreated injury. Determined to change this cruel twist of fate and prevent a future catastrophe, Annette makes a vow. First step, stop Sis Rain from ruining his leg in the first place. If she can get the two of them to become childhood friends, surely that dark future can be avoided, right? With her plan in motion, Annette enthusiastically visits him daily, calling out, "Sis, I'm here." She's been putting an absolute mountain of effort into getting close to him lately, but getting close is an understatement. In reality, it has been a grueling period of pure endurance for our main character. Her routine consists of bringing him food and getting completely ignored, or chattering away by herself and getting ignored again. She even tried pulling the "I'm older than you," but Annette refuses to give up. Everything changes. Breaking through his usual cold silence, Sis Rain weakly looks up from the floor and calls out her name. Stunned but completely thrilled that her hard work has finally paid off, Annette brightens up instantly. Beaming a massive smile, she hands over a fresh loaf of bread, saying, "You like this bread, right? I sneaked some out to give to you." However, her excitement quickly fades into confusion. Standing so close, she notices something is terribly wrong, wondering to herself, "But why are you breaking out in a cold sweat like this?" As the shadows stretch across the room, she sees Sis Rain trembling, desperately clutching at the floor just to stay upright. In a flash, Annette drops all her playful energy. She yells out, "Are you hurt?" It looks like the fated moment has arrived early, and his leg is already in danger.